All right, so can we get started? I'm Robert Kleidman. I'm an associate professor of sociology here in the Levin College, and I am also privileged to serve as our faculty athletics representative here at Cleveland State. And my job today is simple. It's just to introduce President Bloomberg, who will kick off the event. President Bloomberg's been our president for not quite a year. You probably know the date, right? But it's not quite a year, having previously served as provost. As I'm sure you've found out, she's an inspiring leader, an outstanding leader, and she appreciates and supports the role of sports in building leadership, in building community on and off campus, in strengthening academics, and in general, helping our university fulfill its mission. Some of what she does in that sense is pretty visible. If you really want to have fun, sit near her and her husband John at an athletics event, but make sure you know the fight song, because you're gonna be in big trouble with her if you don't know the fight song. So that's and make sure you wear green, as she made sure to tell me when I wasn't. But she's also, as we know, at a lot of things behind the scenes, and she really, we were talking with our student athletes, and what we hear from them is they believe that she really understands them. And I think in general, President Bloomberg makes sure that our student athletes, our faculty, our administrators, our staff, and our community partners feel understood and appreciated and supported. So I could say more, but we do want to get started. So we have a fantastic panel. I'm looking forward to the conversation. So let me welcome Dr. Bloomberg.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see all of you. Thank you, Dr. Kleidman. I have had the opportunity in a couple of different institutions to meet with faculty athletic representatives, FARs, and sometimes I've heard, oh, am I the FAR? And then I met Dr. Kleidman and saw the level of engagement. I don't think I've shown up at an athletics event that you haven't been at. And we've had rich conversations. I have been invited to SAC meetings that have knocked my socks off here from 8 to 10 in the evening after a full day of classes and school and practice and all kinds of other things, and then engaging at that level with Rob as an advisor to that group, and it's just very, very impressive to me. I'm glad all of you are here. I think this is a vitally important topic. I'd like to recognize our athletics director, Scott Garrett, who is here, certainly our FAR, our Dean of the Levin School of Public Affairs and Education, Dr. Roland Englund, and Barb Anthony, who is both the co-founder and the director of NOWSA, the Northeast Ohio Women's Sports Alliance, and all of you, and certainly our remarkable panelists that you'll hear from. My own background is as a public affairs scholar, so the topic of sports in our public lives is near and dear to me, both as a sports fan and as a public affairs person. And everything I know about leadership resonates with the topics that I'm sure you're going to be discussing today. Most notably is that we don't go it alone. We just don't go it alone. In our public lives, in our civic lives, there is very little that we do of value or of note that we do alone. We build interdisciplinary teams of diverse people with diverse backgrounds and skill sets, and we do it together. When I think about that, I can't think of many more activities or pursuits that prepare us better than sport. The way we engage with each other and need to support each other in sports. So I am very glad that we're having this forum today. I think it's a really important topic. I'm so proud of our student athletes, that order. And I see the leaders of our athletics programs always prioritizing the well-being of our students. Not only their success in the classroom and on the court or the field or the track, but their success as human beings. And that's what's going to prepare all of us, all of you, and all of us as a society for success going forward. Now, I got a little confession. I hate to do a welcome and then leave. I almost never do that, but today I'm going to do it. And I'm so glad that this is recorded. And now that I know it's recorded, I'll fess up about why I'm going to do this. Because I am a lousy golfer, and I have asked the women's golf team to give me a lesson, and I have now rescheduled on them 3 times, and this evening would be the 4th if I didn't hightail it over here and get over to the golf simulator so they can help me figure out how to get a drive off the tee box and at least 80 yards down the fairway, which would be an accomplishment for me. So I'm glad you're here. I hope it's a great conversation. I look forward to seeing the recording, and thank you to our panelists and to you, Barb, for your leadership on this. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Bloomberg. Definitely, we at NAUSA would fully support that reason to take up a new sport in adult life and public life, so good luck. We hope you hit it 100 instead of 80. Thank you also to Dr. Kleidman for the invitation initially to help develop today's forum. My name is Barb Anthony. I'm one of the founders of the Northeast Ohio Women's Sports Alliance. Together with Elise Bigley, who's here, our board of directors and volunteers, NAUSA exists to promote access to recreational and competitive sports after college, as well as assist with more than 20 teams by offering resources and tailored supports to help with their gaps and fill their gaps in the community with their needs as well. Our mission aligns really well with today's topic. Similar to what Dr. Bloomberg said, we're deep in conversations with folks in the community every day about whether they want to get back involved in sports, they miss their athletic identity, and they need to figure out how that shows up for them now that their physical capabilities have changed, their personal lives have changed. And so we're rooted in this conversation on a regular basis, which is why I was so excited when Dr. Kleidman reached out. It's super important to stay involved in some capacity for our physical and mental and sense of belonging out there. I know that we're going to hear a lot from our panelists about how sport shows up for them, and I'm really excited. So I'd like to start by introducing each of our panelists. Just give a little wave. When I say your name, Kirsten Green, all the way at the end, is a 2015 Cleveland State University graduate from the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, where she earned her degree in promotional communication and journalism. At CSU, she was a member of the women's basketball program, amassing over 1,200 points in her 4-year career. In her role with the Cleveland Cavaliers as a senior youth sports and group development specialist, she works closely with members of the Cleveland community creating memorable experiences. Welcome, Kirsten. DeAndre Brown. Dre is a former professional athlete turned CEO and founder, director, and DE&I officer of both the Dre Day Foundation 32 Incorporated and the YMCA of Youngstown, with 8 years of experience providing underserved communities with coaching, resources, and mentoring. By focusing on positively affecting the lives of children and families in the community, Dre has been able to put his bachelor's degree in sports management from Cleveland State University to good use. His strengths at Dre Day and the Y have garnered some recognition from the City of Youngstown's mayor's office and the YMCA of the USA. Thanks for being here, Dre. Shelby Seberg is a graduate research assistant and recognized student athlete in fencing at Cleveland State University. She holds 3 bachelor's degrees in environmental science, environmental studies, and urban and regional studies, representing her 2022 graduating class as valedictorian. Shelby is studying to receive her master's in legal studies to focus on environmental law. Shelby has received various recognition and awards as a student athlete throughout her career, including being named fencing team captain and women's MVP, Vespi's Bleed Green Athlete of the Year, and Rookie of the Year. Amazing. Lena Harris is a licensed professional counselor with a certificate in sports social work, working in the field with specific expertise and interest in supporting athletes by providing clinical services and success coaching. She was a 4-year track and field student athlete at Duquesne University, NCAA Leadership Conference nominee, 4-time Dean's List and Director of Athletics and A10 Commissioner's Honor Roll, and Vice President of their Student Athletic Advisory Committee. Lena holds 2 master's degrees, one in forensic psychology and a master's of education in clinical mental health licensure from Cleveland State University. Welcome, Lena. Greg Vlasic. After high school, Greg received a scholarship to the Cleveland Institute of Art. After 1 year, he decided to follow his dream of playing Division I college basketball and transferred to Cleveland State University. He made the team as a walk-on, playing 4 years for the Vikings. He graduated from CSU with honors, earning a bachelor's degree in design. Greg's passion and determination have been pivotal in starting and growing the GV brand into what it is today. GV Art Plus Design is a creative boutique specializing in original artwork, design, and apparel. Their work has always stood out, making headlines in both local and national media. From SportsCenter, TNT, MLB Network, and Jimmy Kimmel to the front pages of Yahoo, ESPN, NBA.com, and Sports Illustrated, their artwork has captured the world's attention. Pretty impressive group of individuals, wouldn't you all say? So welcome, and we're going to get started. Okay. Also, just a quick note and preface before we get going. A lot of us probably have a very positive experience with sports or look at sports in a really positive way. And we also might be coming at this with an athlete perspective or former athlete perspective. But I also want to make sure to dispel any exclusivity around the conversation because our experiences don't exist without our caregivers' support, coaches' support, and folks who consider themselves fans or people who might say, I'm not an athlete. So you are welcomed to this conversation, and I want to make sure anyone watching the recording or here or even passing by feels like they can participate. So just wanted to make sure everybody feels welcome. Okay, so this forum is about sports in our public lives. We all didn't warp here or just arrive in this public space. The first question that I would love to hear from each of you briefly, and I would, well, you're sitting next to me, Dre, so I hope you're okay with this. I wonder if you can start off by sharing how you experienced the transition from sports to your first role in professional life, what that looked like, if you can share a story or memory, and grab that mic next to you. So each of you have time now to think. Dre's on the spot. Oh, wait. And then wait 1 second. There you go.
All right. So my first transition after, you're saying collegiate sports, correct?
Sure.
Well, it wasn't too hard for me because my transition into professional life was still basketball. So that transition was fairly easy. It is something I knew I wanted to do and always strove to accomplish. So that first transition was easy enough. It was the transition after that was the hardest. That is where I was lost. So a little bit more challenging, I'll say. Not too difficult because I figured out a way to still stay connected to the sport through my foundation. So I would say it was fairly easy for me.
Okay. Shelby, I'm going to come to you next. I'm glad that you're ready, though, Lena. Shelby, you're kind of in the process of experiencing this transition, possibly. You want to share a little bit about how it is for you?
Yeah, so initially after my senior year, I thought it was like super difficult to transition just because I've had all this time. What do? I'm not practicing anymore. I'm doing an internship, so it's not like a 40-hour job kind of thing. I just kind of found myself doing other things with my life. So all of a sudden I liked running, trying to do other physical activities that made me feel like I was still part of sports and really engaging with my teammates who were still fencing. And then now realizing that I have a lot of opportunities still and trying to include sport in any way I can right now.
Yeah, who would like to go next?
For me, it was definitely pretty difficult. When I graduated CSU, I thought I was going to continue my career, like Dre said, playing professionally overseas. So I thought I had a contract to go play in Australia. Long story short, wasn't the case. And so that was kind of a tough, challenging moment for me. And then my first job actually out of Cleveland State was at Enterprise. Shout out to Lisa Heeman, actually. Her husband her husband now worked at Enterprise and kind of got me in there. Definitely wasn't an easy transition. Obviously, the getting up early was fine. Was accustomed to doing that in terms of our practices and things like that. But transitioning to the work world while still trying to kind of live my college life was difficult, but managed to kind of make that transition, and then eventually got into sports. But it was tough at first.
So since I've been, 2 years old, sports and art's kind of been my passion. And so after graduating at Cleveland State, I was doing a lot of paintings and drawings and stuff for some of the Browns players and different people like that. So that transition was a little bit easier because I knew what I wanted to do, just didn't know how to do it and how I was going to go about it. So again, we were doing a lot with artwork and different things like that, and then that kind of transitioned into starting our business with the apparel and different things. At the time, not everyone was going to spend $2,000 on a painting, but a lot of people could, everyone could spend $25 on a shirt and stuff. So I think that was kind of that transition from, the sports and art and figuring out kind of how to mold it and, evolve that into a business. And, that's kind of how it went for us.
Thanks. Lena?
So initially, leaving college, it was very difficult to try to figure out what was next. I knew sport was not going to be next. Definitely didn't want to go to the Olympics as a thrower, but didn't know what was next because I had to change my major, which was that track of, it was physical therapy, so obviously sport is a part of that, but once I changed my major, I didn't know what was next. So it took me a while to kind of figure out, what do I want to be when I grow up? So I think I'm still trying to figure that out right now, but it's come a little easier as far as transitions go.
Yeah. Just a quick follow-up question, maybe for all of you. Would it have helped earlier on in your athletic careers if anybody had talked to you about life after? Or would it had not registered the same way had you had experienced it authentically? Does anyone have any thoughts?
I could start.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like as athletes, you kind of get stuck in your own bubble of just your teammates and your day-to-day with practice and games and things like that, where you kind of lose sight of, what your next steps are. And for me, that was the case. I feel like when I was at CSU, I didn't do a great job of networking outside of, just the traditional sports teams here. Had I done that, I feel like I would have been on track to work in sports quicker. I eventually got there, but it took just a couple jobs that I really didn't want to do. Worked at Enterprise, worked at an IT company, and kind of just had to figure out my way. But had I kind of branched out a bit, got outside of my network, I think I could have gotten there quicker.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I think as an athlete, especially Division I level when you're playing, I assume most of athletes, they say, I would like to be a professional at this. So, of course it helps to have that conversation, but I kind of think it might need to change as far as how it's delivered. It will stop eventually. You will not be an athlete forever. So I think we should tackle it, or that we should go into it in the conversation of saying, you can be a professional, sure, but when it's over, what would you like to do? And I think that's something that would have helped me. Because when it stopped, you're like, no, it'll stop either soon or it'll stop later, but it will stop at some point. So just think about it. What does it look like after your sport?
Yeah, thanks. That's a lot of what we tend to say on a regular basis, or at least I say. It's not about when, but how, if and how, or not if, but when and how this happens, right? And it looks different for everybody. And I would imagine that, from an athlete's perspective, that would have been helpful. From a coach's perspective, they might be very hesitant to have that conversation. Did anyone have a, coaching, maybe high school even, or college, that a coach that really thought of your life in kind of the future thinking of you as a whole person? Did anyone have experiences or coaches or anybody that was within your sport experience? Because I think that's vitally important to have that support. But I also understand maybe it's a tough thing to deal with as a coach, right? We don't want to limit your competitive edge. We don't want to make you think outside of this current competitive experience. So any stories or ideas about that?
I mean, I would say that maybe not my coaches or anyone like that, but my parents definitely did that. Like, they were making sure that, don't have all your eggs in one basket. You don't just have to compete in fencing. You can do other sports. So I did a lot of sports, and I kind of fell in fencing. But yeah, no one really framed that for me until I had to do that by myself when I graduated. Once I realized what I had to do by myself to kind of find my next step in life.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that before I kind of shift? Go ahead.
Coach Waters was, he would always tell us, think about after basketball, what that would look like. But I also have to say this because my father is out here right now in the crowd, and he for sure would tell me to think about life after sport and what that looks like. So, I mean, that's a conversation me and him had, just growing up. That's why I had to say that in front of him. I don't want to get in trouble. Cool. But yeah, definitely, that's a conversation that I was fortunate enough to be able to think about along my path. So,
good job, Dad. So a lot of us up here, and after meeting you all and looking at your bios, we're very much still in sport in some way, which I don't know is incredibly common for kind of your traditional public life. But I'm curious about if you knew that you wanted sport to be part of your professional life. And I'm Kirsten, I'll come to you first. How did your sport experience influence your career path? Did you know from the beginning? Did sport help you define that? And then follow up to that for all of you, what's the most surprising thing you found out working in sports instead of being the athlete?
Well, off the bat, I definitely knew that I wanted to work in sports. Didn't really know in what capacity that would be. But after, like I said, I was kind of stuck in this rut of doing jobs that I didn't want to do. And so I was like, obviously I want to work in sports. I want to see if I can get to the NBA. So I literally applied to probably about 10 different teams. I was willing to get up and move anywhere if I can just kind of get my foot in the door. Luckily enough, I heard back from the Cavs first, like, what are the odds of that? Obviously going to school here and then getting a call back from the Cavs, it was kind of a surreal moment for me. And then the interview process went kind of quickly, and then was able to kind of start, it's called the Foundation, our inside sales program with the Cavs. And it kind of just is a stepping stone and kind of builds up your career in terms of where you want to go in terms of the organization. Do you want to remain in sales? Do you want to go to marketing, et cetera? And so after that program, I transitioned into a hybrid role between youth sports and group sales. So yeah, knew early on that I wanted to be in sports. So fortunate that I was able to kind of make the transition, especially back to Cleveland, where it's definitely my second home. I moved away and I was like, man, why did I do that? You don't really know, how special this city is until you move away, and then I was able to come back. So definitely very fortunate that I got back here. So
thank you. Greg, did you always know? Like you mentioned earlier that, since you were, as long as you can remember, sports and art have been your things, but did you know that you could make them both for a professional life?
I definitely didn't know how, but again, I did know that, okay, these are the two things that I'm most passionate about. But I can remember even as, in high school and my teachers, in art class, I was, always the best artist in the class, but I draw athletes or I draw Kobe Bryant or whatever. And it was, their teachers didn't really like that. But fortunately, my parents, my dad was very artistic, and they encouraged it, and they were, hey, whatever you love, keep going at it and stuff like that. So again, I knew in some way we were going to try to combine these, or at least one, but hopefully both. And so it just, everything really worked out well with, again, doing the artwork. But I can remember being in study tables with the basketball team, and I had an art project and I was drawing Muhammad Ali, and why does he get to draw in class and stuff? And so even from then, I think the kids, they would give me a hard time at first, and then they're like, okay, this is what he's doing, this is what he wants to do. So it worked out well after, again, just transitioning into that artwork, but really having that grind, that sports and being an athlete and getting up so early and all that, it really motivates you. And but I think too, a lot of that is building those relationships, because so much of our business and just talking with the athletes and all these things is built up through the relationships, and just I'm a fan first and foremost, so now getting the opportunity to work with these guys and different things like that. So again, I knew but wasn't sure, and had to evolve it consistently to get it to where we wanted it.
So still in transition, right?
A
I think
little
all of
bit,
us
yeah,
sounds
yeah,
like we
yeah,
all
yeah.
are, right?
Yeah.
Lena, it seems like when you had said earlier, and knowing you, that the clear-cut working in sports wasn't that clear when you graduated. Did you know that you'd want to get back into like sport mental health? Did you think that was even an option for you? And do you want to share about that?
So I ended up changing my major to psychology just so that I could have something to graduate with. But I remember graduating and having this discussion with my mom. She's like, so what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, well, you got to pick something. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to work with people with problems. And she's like, how can you not do that? Like, there's something everywhere. And I feel like I might have had like a temper tantrum at that time. Probably a little old for that, but still trying to figure out like, what am I going to do? And it just kind of circled back around, I would say. Mental health was not on my radar at that time. Like, I just knew some kind of way I've got to figure something out. Tried forever to get, on the collegiate level to be an academic advisor after working with high school athletes for a long time. I'm like, oh, I could do this, like, on the next level. Never could get in. Ended up changing my major to go into clinical mental health counseling, and then realized, like, oh, you can merge the two. Like, athletics never left. I was always attending games, never participating in anything myself, so to speak, but just always being a fan, coming from a long line of athletes and coaches, and just now, like, oh, these two go together.
Cool. So a lot of what we're talking about is, a lot of transition talk, right? And so the definition of success as an athlete is very clear, I think, when you're playing or actively competing. And I think your systems, your family, your friends, the people you know, have this also shared agreement of what success looks like for you. So upon entering public life, how did you manage those expectations of the people who were closest to you about what they kind of imagined success should look like for you? And how did you kind of temper that if maybe your ideas of success were different? Dre, yeah, I mean, you looked at me first. Shelby, did you have anything? But it looks like you got something to say, Dre, so. I'm coming to you next, Shelby.
I didn't, but I'll have to think of something. Success, to manage that, well, first, I mean, you have to be totally confident in believing that what you define success is success, and don't let the world give you their view on success. So I'll start there first. So after saying that, I will say if it wasn't my parents, I honestly wouldn't care what the world thought of my success, because if my parents are happy with it and I'm happy with it, I think that defines me as a person, and I'm successful, I'm happy with that. So so really, that's my answer. I mean, if I felt that I was doing something I'm passionate about and that I love and felt heartfelt about, and that my parents thought it was, of substance and, doing good, that would be my definition of success. And as long as I can be an example to the youth, I have a passion for the youth, and I am the oldest of 5 siblings. So if they thought I was doing well, and if I was paying it forward and giving knowledge to what was installed in me from my family and my peers and mentors in life, I think I would be doing great.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think that's super. And I would also say I think that the other side of that is that sometimes parents and caregivers invest a lot in their kids' athletic experiences, from youth sports all the way up. And so they have this idea, right, or this hope that it just continues in their way. And so that's, and I think that the alignment that you talk about within your family is amazing, and definitely something to be really celebrated. I don't know if that's everybody's experience, but I think managing those around you as you start to transition into this different maybe identity as a lawyer or something else, people look at you or think of you differently. So Shelby, do you have any thoughts as we're talking about this?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, for me, success was kind of what I defined it as. I didn't really care what other people thought. I just wanted to be happy. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I wanted to make sure that it was the best that I could do, especially with, like, all the majors and stuff that I did. It was because, like, I had the time, and I thought, why not? Like, I want to make sure that I leave college proud of what I did, knowing that I couldn't leave anything else on the floor, kind of like in sports that we do every day. And then with, entering the workforce, realizing that even though it's not athletic really related, I can say, well, I'm a good time manager. I know I can do that, and I'm going to do it well. Maybe I don't have as much background in this particular area as someone else, but I know that I can do it the best that I can do, and I know I can do it better than the next recruit.
That's awesome. Everybody can call Shelby if they need some, some like confidence boosting, because just the self-assurance is really wonderful. And I just want to throw support behind how challenging that may be, and also just to say, like, keep that perspective as you go along. Anybody else have anything to offer in terms of, like, managing or even changing your own definition of what success looks like? Could be anything.
I'll chime in. Just listening to what Shelby said and obviously what Dre said, but combining the two is, my mom has always been like a big support for me. Like, sport was a sense of childcare when I was younger, but then I just learned to love it just from being around it, from doing it, obviously, from the people that I met going. So it started with AAU track in the summer. So just meeting those people and then seeing I guess in everyday life throughout the regular like school year. But then just thinking about the goals that I set for myself. So I guess a sense of success for me would be accomplishing those goals. Now, if I didn't accomplish it, what do I need to do to change it to accomplish it? But I just feel like setting those goals, whatever they may be, and accomplishing them was kind of like, or has been, like my definition of success, not really necessarily what anybody else says, because I'm doing it, you're not. So it's my definition.
Yeah, thanks. Anybody else?
So my freshman year of college, I went to Cleveland Institute of Art, and because art was the direction I was going. It was too much all art for me. I couldn't take it. So I transferred to Cleveland State and ended up walking on. I went to one open gym. Their coaches went to one open gym, and it worked out great. My parents, knowing how much I love sports, just making the team for me was a success. So that was, it didn't matter how much I played or that type of thing. And then I think, afterwards, again, like a lot of them, my parents were super supportive, and my mom and dad just, they wanted me to do something that I enjoyed doing. And so I think the fact that, I was able to, continue the art aspect of it. I know my mom was always worried about, are you going to make any money, type of thing. And again, just that motherly, like trying to be supportive, but at the same time worried about you and stuff like that. So I can remember those conversations in the beginning, like, all right, like I know you think this is taking off, but is it time to get another part-time job or, type of thing. But I think successful to me was doing something that I love to do. And, our business has never been about trying to make money. It's always been doing what we enjoy, and the money will follow, and it'll come from there. And so I think that's the fact that, I get to work with my brother and my dad as well, and it's a family business, and the fact that we get to work together and do what we love and support our families that's successful to me.
Thank you. Kirsten, do you have anything to add?
That's awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
But for me, so post-graduation, like I was kind of struggling with like my identity post being an athlete. My mom, like you all, she was the one who pushed me to kind of like get back into things and at least try to work in sports. So big shout out to her. So yeah, she was the one who gave me my initial motivation and kind of confidence, because I was definitely kind of lacking it at that point in my life. And so big ups to my mother. So
Make sure they all see these recordings if that's possible, because they're getting some serious support from all of you. Maybe they don't hear, maybe they hear it on a regular basis, but I'm sure, like being a parent, I know that I would want to watch this for sure if my kids were up here. So thank you. So it sounds like we're still transitioning, right? We're all still growing in this. A lot of what I hear is it's about the process. You just have to start, and you've got to trust yourself, and you've got to just keep going, have a goal, manage your own success, and define what that is. So what can we say to those in the audience here, but also those who may watch this recording, and what practical advice would you offer to student athletes who feel like they are competing with counterparts who have had the opportunity to gain more work experience than they have because of their athletic schedule, because of their responsibilities, and just that added extra, which is essentially like 2 full-time jobs going to college, right? This can be about interviewing, resume tips, general feedback about skills and assets. Can we offer any practical wisdom back to those who may benefit? I know that's a heavy one, because I know there's probably a lot, but.
I mean, I think just being an athlete, you learn so much that will carry over. I know I have my own business, but at the same time, even from that standpoint, which I didn't really think of, but like, when they're hiring for our stores and someone has athlete or even high school athlete, whatever on there, they're going to be able to work well with others and take criticism and be teachable, coachable. So I think that's something that we look for, and I'm sure other businesses do as well. So I think from that standpoint, like there's just so many characteristics of getting up early and having to be accountable and there was times when you went through all the practices, but you didn't play. And so I just think, there's so much of that, other students aren't doing that, and they think they're further advanced, in their careers and stuff like that. But there's so many experiences that you can't duplicate on a court or with friends, with teammates, with, a lot of times when they become your family, and just that relationship. And again, about building relationships and learning how to build those relationships.
Excellent.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So I do a lot of interviewing for our inside sales classes, and the athletes are the first people that come to the top of the list in terms of who we think are going to be able to excel in this role. So you already have the advantage there. I will say, just kind of build those relationships. You might not have time to do like a large scale, what's it called?
Internship?
Internship, thank you. I was losing my train of thought. Internship, but you can still build relationships, network with people. Like I said, get out of your bubble in terms of just being an athlete and introduce yourself to people. I feel like I didn't do that when I was at CSU. I just kind of was in the groove of just being around my teammates, being around my coaches, being around Renee and Brandon, but definitely build those relationships and network. That can stand out.
Thank you. What else can we offer them?
So obviously to echo what both of them said, but to also kind of take a step back and think about what it is that you want to do at whatever level, whether you be freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Think about what it is that you want to do after, and figure out, where that's at. So if it means, sending an email, getting on LinkedIn, making connections with people in that field, sending an email, or showing up, depending on where it is, to, show that you're interested and figure out what it is that you need to do. Sending an email to somebody and say, hey, I'm an athlete, I have an interest in doing this. When I graduate, can you tell me more about what I need to do to enter the field? People are more receptive to that and more inclined to, kind of walk you through the process than, just no communication at all and just, kind of sending in a resume. So if you make those connections, like everybody said, network, lean into your skills. Figure out what your skills are. I mean, you do them every day, but can you verbalize what that is that you do? Like, you're the captain, but what does that mean? So just trying to figure out, how you can put something on paper, and then network, make communications, just lean in and trust your abilities.
That's great advice.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, like you said, obviously doing the internships as an athlete is hard to do, like Kirsten said, and then obviously communicate. You're around so many people as a student athlete, some of your teammates, some of your fellow students that are walking the halls with you, and just people, fans that just know who you are. You've never talked to them, but they know who you are. But I would say, especially in that resume process, which can be scary for, like you said, if you don't have any intern experience, it is a piece of paper. There is a process after that resume, and like she said, athletes are going to the top in most of these situations. They know that you may have just graduated, so you haven't had the opportunity to do that. Like she said, if you're a captain, what did that entail? You're in charge of a team. When you work in a professional manner, you'll be in charge of a team, no matter what level, but you'll be in charge or have to report to a team. So when you go to that interview process, really hone in on what your talents are, what your skills are, and those are beneficial. You're obviously a hard worker because you're a student athlete. Be confident. You have the ability to play in front of people. You have the ability to be able to go and do an interview and talk in front of a camera or in front of a large crowd. Those are all skills that are they're loved in the professional setting. So just be confident and continue to be a hard worker, and just go in there and know that that piece of paper may not have a bunch of accolades or accomplishments on them, but there is a talking point where you can really express who you are in that face-to-face interview.
Yeah. Oh, excellent, for sure. I think, communication exists in every sport. A lot of what Dr. Bloomberg said really rings true here, too. A lot of skills show up. So I would also counter kind of point. What if the person you're interviewing with, the business that you select, is very not sport, or very maybe doesn't have a positive view of athletes or sports. So I think on one hand, student athletes should be able to feel like they can be discerning in their career paths and in their choices, right? Not every fit is going to be a good fit, but how do you enhance that conversation if you're entering a space where the other person on the other side, the interviewer, it's not sports related in any way? You're gonna have to really promote those skills in a clearer fashion. What happens when it's not about sports? Is there anything specific we can offer? Because a lot of student athletes probably have majors that are not sport related.
Yeah, I'll speak on that just because I'm environmental science, so not really sports related. But in a lot of my interviews for internships or jobs, I definitely highlight my soft skills. Like, I know I can adapt, I know I can learn quickly, and just really highlighting those things and trying to separate myself from others by bringing in sports stories, even though it might not be relevant to the actual work, but saying, hey, I know that when I was captain, there were a lot of arguments, and this is how I handled them. So I know that when I'm in the workplace, I'm going to be able to handle that, and I'll come to you and make them feel confident in those soft skills so they won't have to worry about that, and they can help me with the more tangible aspects of the work life if they need to.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I mean, after she started talking, I started thinking, like, it still translates. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
It
does translate.
it's still the same. You might not be a fan on the other side, so maybe I'll just change my words a little bit, but it still translates.
Right. So I think how you're approaching an interview, how you're approaching public life, though, what we're hearing then is you can show up as you. You can show up as what you've learned and what you've gained, no matter what job. It doesn't have to be about sports, and you don't have to feel more or less comfortable. So is that what I'm hearing from all of you, that you show up as authentically you, understand your skills and assets of what you bring, and then try to figure out how to make that yours in that interview? Yeah. So I do think that I think sometimes student athletes think of it as, oh, you're in sports management, it's going to be easier for you because you're an athlete. Well, maybe there's some conceptual understanding, but everything applies the same. Environmental law, sports, business, social work, right? Same thing. Yeah. Okay, very cool. I hope that some of that is helpful or validating to student athletes that may watch this or hear today. I would love to hear from each of you because during kind of our brief meet and greet, there were a lot of great stories, and we don't have all the time in the world. I would love to, have a dinner forum where we all just kind of hang out and share stories for a long period of time. But I want all of you to have an opportunity to share a pivotal moment or, impactful person or memory, something that really shaped you or is foundational to your public life now. Anybody's willing to start. I'm gonna pick on Greg if nobody starts to share a story about his experience as an athlete, maybe in high school, only because I know that and I think it's an amazing story. But anybody else is willing to go. And Greg, you're welcome to pick a different pivotal moment if you don't want to feel.
No,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay.
You gravitated towards this one, so I'll
I
tell
love it.
So back in high school, I played basketball with the same group of kids up until 11th grade. We were looking forward to our senior year. I ended up getting cut from my basketball team senior year. As a 17-year-old kid that is extremely impactful and was really hard to swallow. So I ended up knowing I still wanted to play basketball and continue playing. I transferred from Lakewood to John Marshall, which is a Cleveland public school. The coach was amazing, took me in. The season had basically already started, so I was joining kids that, again, had been playing since they were, in 4th grade together and stuff. And at the time, that was, such a hard moment to go through and just very challenging, but I feel like so much of that I learned from and grew from, and it made me so much stronger as a person, and just a lot of those experiences of coming into this new atmosphere, it really translated when I got to Cleveland State and went from, a school, and they already had the basketball team set. They needed one more walk-on player. I, tried out, against 8 other kids, was that one player that made it, and joined a team already in progress, with a bunch of kids I didn't know. And so I think there's a lot of times you're going to be going through things, or in the moment you're like, how did this happen? And you're not sure how to get through it. But, all those moments just, you learn from them and they make you better, and you never know which moment you're going through or what hard time you're going through now will really help you. And I think even with our business, there were so many times in the beginning when we started it, in 2008, we started a Cleveland that I love was the brand and the first shirt. And I remember people being like, who wants to wear Cleveland stuff? Like, who's going to wear this? And I remember, my brother and I, and we were passionate about the city and knew other people were too. They just didn't have a way to express it. But like, even thinking of all the stores we went into when we didn't have our own store, and they said no, and we're good and stuff, and just having to really believe in yourself throughout, and it doesn't matter what other people think, it doesn't matter what other people say, and I think that's huge with sports, and now translates to business, and to, I'm sure everyone up here was told no in interviews, and they had to, keep grinding, and again, believe in themselves, and, it helped that, again, have that family and supportive, parents and family and stuff like that as well, so.
Thanks for
Yeah.
letting me pick on you. That's
Yeah,
an amazing
it's all
story.
right.
Thank you. Who else wants to share maybe a pivotal memory, impactful person? Something really that stands out. It doesn't have to be monumental. It could be something special to you.
I'll share something real quick. So in fencing, just background, like there's two handles. You can have a French grip, which is kind of like holding a stick, and then a pistol grip, which is just more ergonomical per se. And in fencing, it's like a really big deal about which grip you have for some weapons, and other weapons it isn't. And so like my whole life fencing, I was told, you're not going to be a good fencer because you're fencing with a French grip, and you need to switch. And the reason why you're losing these bouts is because you're not having the right equipment. And so when I got to championships, I realized that like, hey, I got here because of my French grip and because I knew what was best for me. And as far as like public lives go, I know that I've worked my butt off to get to where I am, and I know that I have the skills, and even if people say no, I know that there's a next step, and there's always going to be another team that's going to want me a part of that. So just always believing in what work I've put in and having confidence in the work that I've done.
Thanks. Good for you.
So I've had a few pivotal moments in my life, fortunately, but one of them that shaped my career after basketball was, I tell this story all the time, and my father was, after I was still playing at the time, but my father was like, you got to throw a camp, you got to do a basketball camp in the city. And I'm like, no, nobody wants to come to DeAndre's basketball camp. Like, who am I? Like, if LeBron was here or somebody, they come to that camp. Nobody wants to come to my camp. He's like, you got to do it. And so one day, I'm like, okay, let's do the camp. So we had this camp. Just knew we were going to have basketballs in the gym. There's so many other things you have to think of, registration, all of this. So we did it. I got flyers out. Finally had this camp. And I say there were about 30 participants at this camp, and 22 of them were my family and little cousins or whatever. So I'm like, oh, all right, this is going to be a rough first camp, but you said I had to have a camp, so let's act confident about it. Let's do it. So we're doing the camp. It's a 3-day camp. The 8 other kids that I didn't know, one of these kids at the end of the camp, they came up to me with his grandmother. And I noticed that the kid did not speak during the whole camp. He couldn't talk. I didn't know if he was just shy or whatever. They're kids, so just continue to teach them. But at the end of this camp, this little boy came up to me with his grandmother, and his grandmother literally started bawling in tears. And I got emotional before she even talked, because I'm like, why are you crying? I'm crying too. Like, what's going on? And she started to explain the impact that in just 3 days that we had on this young man's life. He could barely speak. He was maybe 12. He was a teenager. But he attempted to at that moment. And I'm still to this day not really sure what he said, but just the look on her face and her tears and the expression of how, we just installed some excitement in his life, how he felt like he had friends and he got mentoringship and fellowship, just to be among peers and especially men, young men that were teaching him positive influences. That meant the world to me. So I was like, those 8 kids, but especially that one, really made an impact on me. So from that day, we have a foundation. It's called Dre Day Foundation. And it is because my father, who calls himself Big Dre. I still think I'm Big Dre. It is a day in the life of what we do, a day in the life of things that he's taught me my whole life, which is to be, a good person first. Basketball is just our vehicle and our vessel, but we're there to be good people first. You get the basketball portion and install some skill in you, but we're really using that to get to youth especially, to be a positive influence in their lives, to give them something to do in a place where there's limited resources. And we all know, I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and we all know in places where there's limited resources, our youth tends to do the wrong things. When there's idle time, our youth tend to do the wrong things. So that was a pivotal moment for me because it set me on the path to where I am now. Our foundation has been going strong for almost 7 years now, and it got me to my position where I am now at the YMCA to continue to serve, families in the community and just to be a pillar in the community like how I felt and always looked up to my father. And that's why I say paying it forward is always just the biggest thing to me. So for me to be able to do that now and to give that to the youth, that was the moment where I knew after basketball, and I'm blessed to still be doing the basketball with it, but that was my pivotal moment where it just set me on the track where I am now. And I'm just forever grateful for that young boy and for his family and that first camp with 22 of my cousins.
Thanks, Dre. That's awesome. Lena, Kirsten, would you like to share a story?
How do you follow that up, Dre? Jeez.
Should have gone last.
Okay. I guess like two things come to mind. One for me personally was kind of my junior year of high school. I had decided, I think I was playing basketball that year. 3-sport athlete in high school, volleyball, basketball, track. But my junior year, I missed going to states in track by a couple inches. I think it was the shot put at that time. And I went home, got a calendar, and I wrote the days, counted backwards to next year at this time, I'm gonna be at the state meet and I'm placing in the state meet. So from then on, I decided I'm not playing any other sport. I'm only doing track. So I really focused in on that. And my coach, my high school coach, who is still the coach at Beechwood, so shout out to Willie Smith. He's been there a long time. But he really was like, okay, this is what you want to do. All right, let's do this. So my senior year, I think, was the first time that I recall doing indoor track. And I really just focused in on, I got to do this. Circle back around to regionals. I think I placed second in the, or first. I don't remember what I sent you. I forget. Sorry. But I placed in regionals to go to the state meet. And that year, I think they had extended the places to 6. So I ended up being 6 in the state that year at the state meet. And I was like, oh, so when you set goals, you can really accomplish them. Okay. And that just kind of carried me through. Fast forward to working with high school athletes and just realizing they really don't have anybody else. They don't, mom may or may not be at home, might be working multiple jobs, what have you, but being able to pour into them and let them know you guys can be successful, you can get out of here and do what you need to do, really let me know oh, you can have a career in sports some kind of way. Many of them went on to graduate from college. Some did not, but they're decent humans and they might be fathers. I've been to weddings, I've been to baby showers. We still have connections, still have relationships, but just being able to be that consistency for them let me know oh, I'm on the right path. So just still trying to figure it out now.
Cool. Kirsten?
I'll go. I know we're keeping it PG up here, but I definitely had an oh shit moment when I was at CSU. So I think this was the summer going into my senior year. We took a trip to Italy. Renee's in the background. I think she might remember this. We were in Italy, and we had a curfew that we had to get back to the hotel at X time every single night. I was being kind of an asshole, and then I didn't make curfew. Basically, long story short. So the rest of the team got back before I did, and I kind of strolled into the hotel, just thinking I could kind of do whatever I wanted. And then my coach is literally standing, waiting for me to walk in with like her arms crossed. And I knew that it wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. She wasn't happy with me. We kind of went back and forth, and I went back up to my room. She told me that I couldn't go out for the rest of the trip. And so when we got back to Cleveland, she was pretty much fed up with me. She had me sign like this last chance agreement, like if I do one more thing, I'm gonna get kicked off the team, basically. And so I called my mom, and I'm like, yeah, Coach P is, doing her yada, yada, yada. And my mom just starts crying. And she's like, you've worked so hard, why you want to throw away, your 4 years basically for nothing? Like, you're about to go into your senior season, you're about to graduate, basically get your act together. So that was kind of my oh shit pivotal moment in my life, and definitely into my professional career, just because we always say this at the Cavs is perception is reality, and it was something that I didn't really grasp at that time in my life. But I'm glad that I kind of turned a corner, and more mindful of my personal brand and my perception and things like that. So that's my story.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So I want to make sure we have time for questions from the folks that are here. But I do have one more question, and I think it's really important to talk about, especially in this setting. And how would you explain, or how would you offer feedback to somebody who maybe needs, not convincing, but the positive impact of sports, of athletics, and of any sport maybe in academic settings? So, right, we talk about sports. Everybody's not untouched by sports. It's all around us. Media. Every single person has a sports story, even if you've never touched a ball or played on a field or jumped in a pool. We all have some kind of touch to sports. So when they say, well, academic settings should be for academics, why are we putting so much emphasis on sports at a college level, any level? How would you respond? How would you say, this is why sports need to be in this environment? This is the positive impact it can make. What would be your argument for that? I think there is one.
I can start with that. Since I was an academic coach for high school athletes, that was a conversation I had all the time with them, because they didn't understand. Some of them did not understand, well, I'm a starter and, I score all the points, or, I get the most yards on the field or whatever. And I had to break it down to them so that they could see that it translates that, okay, yeah, you do that on the field, but if you can't listen in the classroom and do what the teacher asks and complete your assignments, that's the same thing on the field. The coach is the teacher. So they're teaching you the plays. The plays is your homework, the schoolwork, the classwork. So when you get on the field, that's the test, essentially. So if you practice how you were supposed to, if the guard or the tackle doesn't pull right, then, you can't hit the hole right and get it all translates. And once, I was able to, I guess, put it in their language, then they were like, oh, okay, I got it. And you could see some increase in their academics, because they just were like, oh, it does translate, which many of those were the ones to go on and get collegiate, college degrees. So.
Well, and so sports as a vehicle has come up in our conversation today and before as well, that a lot of folks, sports is the way to get the education. So that is one argument for it, but I think that people want more than that. But I think, Lena, that's a great way to really specify how important this is. Anybody else have feedback about this topic? How would you explain the impact, the positive need for athletics in an academic setting?
I would also add that I think sports also teach you some things that being in the classroom doesn't. It teaches you a lot of accountability. If you don't do your homework, you're not going to get a good grade. But then people argue, oh, I can just get a good grade on the test, I'm fine. Whereas in sports, you can't really do that. If you don't put in the work, you're not going to get first place. You're not going to go to the tournaments that you want to go to. And just all the soft skills that you learn, working with others. You don't have to really work with others when you're in the classroom, unless it's a group setting. So I think there's just so much that you can learn in both settings, but together I think it's really powerful.
Thanks.
There's also that, translation. If you're smart in the classroom, you're normally smart on whatever your playing field is, and vice versa. It's just important for higher education. you should want to learn. You should want to, just as you exercise and work out in the gym for your sport, you need to exercise your mind. So, I mean, time management, and like she said, the soft skills that you get in education, it's just, it's necessary.
I agree. Greg?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, there's so much overlap, but a lot of it has to do with, again, hard work and, again, wanting to learn from your coaches, wanting to learn from your teachers, wanting to put in the work, believing that you can, you can do it. So there's so much overlap that we've already kind of talked about, but I think it's just, it's impossible to almost separate them where, and it's funny, like, looking back at when I was here, there was kind of a, like, negative stigma for the basketball players. I remember going into a class and the teacher would find out, oh, you're a basketball player. And it was like, oh, okay, like, are you going to put in the work, So I think there was aspects where you had to go above and beyond where, like, oh, you're an athlete, I need to show them, no, I'm a student, but I had just happened to play sports. So I think, that comes up a little bit as well, where you have to kind of almost break down, and that goes with what you were asking before with, what if there's a job that they don't like sports? You show them you're qualified for the job, and I just so happen to have all these other great, characteristics that I've learned from being an athlete.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kirsten, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, like, I can't imagine going to a school without sports. I think now that we're in March Madness, I believe there was like a poll or study that came out, like there's a direct correlation between the teams that are in the tournament and attendance that spikes the following year after they're in the tournament. So I would just say there's a direct correlation to it. So obviously it's necessary.
Yeah, for sure. I would also say that sports, it builds community, right? So generally speaking, I think sometimes we separate youth and, K through 12 and then collegiate athletics from elite sports for whatever reason. I think the media does that for us, but it all builds community, a sense of belonging, a sense that you have a shared experience with others. And I think if that doesn't exist in an academic setting, you lose quite a bit. You also lose quite a bit of community, potentially, people interested, right? So I think that also might build the argument for, why this is so important and why we need to keep them together and invest. I also want to say, to Greg's point, a tiny story of my own. My high school coach was very much like, you're going to be better than any of the other teams in this whole school. You're going to be, your GPAs are going to be better. All of you are going to make honor roll. Nobody's going to get detention. You have to be better, not only because you're girls in sport, but also because we win more games and we get less gym time, or we win more games and we still have to play on Saturday mornings. And so he was adamant that we excelled beyond the average so that we could show that we weren't getting any handouts as athletes. We were earning everything that we got, and we still didn't get what we deserved. But he didn't let that stop us. So I think that also adds to that point.
And your teammates all held each other accountable, I'm sure, and everything. So
oh yeah, it was we were all in. It was the buy-in was all there together. A lot of attrition. We started with 23 freshmen and ended with 3. Not everybody did it, but there's other components of that we don't have time for. But I want to make sure that we open it up. So thank you, first of all, for answering that question. I know that was, it's hard to think about how to form that argument, but I think all of you have really embodied that through all of your answers today. Any questions or, conversation we invite from all of you? I know there's, I don't know, any thoughts, ideas? We're happy to pass around a mic. If we want to get it on the recording, we need to make sure we're talking into the mic, so I have to make sure we get you one of those. Carolyn, would you bring the mic around for me? Do you mind?
So you all mentioned how much sport provides a community for you within your teammates. So upon graduating, how did you find that community again, whether it was within your sport or your coworkers? How did you kind of fill that gap?
I think our situation is a little bit different because that's directly what we're in, and I think from starting just the positive Cleveland brand to having a bunch of the athletes wearing it to then doing team type shirts to seeing the guys wear it the night before the World Series. The whole team comes out in our shirts and stuff like that. But just, that's cool and all, but just seeing how sports brings people together and fans together and has them, everyone rallies around a team. And, I think that's been huge, just to see the impact that just our clothes or our brand or whatever has had on the city and has had for people's pride. When one of our teams is good in Cleveland, city's just a lot better place to be at, and just, everyone's happier. And so I think, there's that real camaraderie around sports that you literally can't get in any other aspect of life with teams and things.
I think, well, first of all, my family's huge, as you heard before, and we do serve, by the way, way more than 22 of my cousins at our camps now. So that's a way where I kind of filled that gap for community. I kind of created my own community. I've always been very intentional about building relationships and meeting people and talking to people. And we all know we have busy schedules and, we can't talk as much, but I've always been intentional about keeping relationships and talking to people. So I felt like creating our own world with the foundation and making another community is kind of how I filled that gap.
I think just when you're trying to figure it out, it's a lot of conversation and a lot of networking to figure out like what works for you. So maybe it's not necessarily people that you work with, but community sports. So just trying to, network, figure out, maybe there is somebody at work that you guys have a common interest and that sparks into something that there's a whole nother, group of people that they can introduce you to. But I feel like it's a lot of conversation and a lot of networking that kind of can get you to that point to fill that gap.
Thank you all. One of the things, before I ask a quick question, just I think your question and your answers really helped me connect the dots in something that I think is real important, which is you're all visible to everyone else. And one of the things we can tell to our students, to our kids, whatever, is, well, you admire this team or you admire this athlete, they win a lot, but think about why, right? Because they work hard, because they have all these qualities you talk about. And it applies to whatever you're doing. So don't think they just got there because somebody bestowed this on them. So I think, in a way, what you're doing in your sport is modeling those kinds of qualities for everybody else, and it's up to those of us who are parents, teachers, whatever, to make sure that lesson gets through too. It's not just that some of you wind up famous and rich. It's, you earned it. The question I have is, there's coaches, other athletics folks here. What can we all do to help current and future student athletes get to the point where you are, where you're so good at articulating what qualities you've developed through sports that are useful in the work world and the community? I mean, I don't think when you were just graduated, maybe you would have been that articulate. Maybe you would have. But what can we do to help people get to kind of where you are now with that?
I'm a firm believer of just almost just jumping out there to fire. Like, cast out as many nets as you can into life, and it might be a deep end, but see what you pull out of it. So I would say, as a staff, especially at our own universities, putting those student athletes in those situations, kind of voluntold them into that. What do you want to do? I don't know. Well, let's figure it out. Let's do something. What better people to have working in administration here, or former or future coaches, or whatever it may be at the university, than the students that have been here and graduated from here. So I think that's the perfect opportunity to be able to present those opportunities and push them that way to kind of figure it out. And if they might find something that they necessarily wouldn't have done if someone didn't force them in that direction. And they also could say, well, I don't like that. And then by the time you're out of college, you're not wasting time. You've done something, you don't like it, that's fine. Move on to the next thing. You've done something that you like, stay there. That might be, where your life takes you. But I don't believe that we get it right the first time in anything in life. So just present those opportunities to our student athletes and just see what happens.
I would also add maybe starting this conversation as a freshman, because I think starting it as a junior or senior, you're so busy, you're thinking about this is my final season, and you're really putting all your cards into your sport, and you forget to look farther out into what your life may hold. So maybe starting that earlier and having, and then being like smaller conversations, right? Like you don't need to be a top tier interviewer when you're a freshman in college. But maybe think about like all the roles that you might want to entertain in the future, and then as you get to your senior year, you feel more confident with how to articulate your skills and maybe the positions that you want to hold later.
So I remember when I was probably my junior, senior year here, the basketball team did a little program where they kind of paired us up with somebody in the business, world that kind of was along the lines of what we wanted to do, and I remember that being like, that was a pretty cool thing, and I think a lot of the kids, I don't know if they still do that, but if they don't, I think that was something that was impactful. And again, kind of along the lines of what DeAndre said, I think kind of forcing the student athletes out of their comfort zone where, okay, what do you want, you're not positive what you want to do, but try it as a sophomore, and you might, I'm sure all of us have failed, and I think that's what's made us successful is failing and realizing, okay, this isn't what I want to do, or this isn't the direction I want to go. So I think, again, kind of what she said, rather than trying to figure that out your junior or senior year, maybe your freshman year, you're kind of trying to, oh, okay, I know I don't like this. Well, that's better to find out then. So I think kind of just, I think there's you don't have a lot of time as an athlete, but I think a lot of businesses, especially locally, if they know you're an athlete, they might be inclined, all right, we'll give you 3 hours a week or 5 hours a week versus jumping right in, and that's a good way to get your feet wet. They're also going to understand that's why you can't be in full time, but that might open the door for a job after, or again, you might realize that's not what you want to do, but I think finding that out a little bit earlier. But that program, if they still do it, I thought was really helpful.
And just to echo kind of what everybody has said so far, is that kind of being intentional about having these conversations with student athletes. I for one, when I went to the school I went to was because of their physical therapy program, not knowing after 2 years I'd have to change my major, but sometimes you do come in with an idea of what you want to do, and for whatever circumstances, things may change, but having those conversations, being intentional about that, and even maybe, like Greg said, as a team, you designate this time during your off season to maybe have shadow day or shadow days to kind of figure out like, what is it, that I want to do? What do I have an interest in? Building those connections, communication, reaching out to people to see, hey, I'm a basketball player at Cleveland State. This is my interest. This is my off season. Can I come shadow you for a day to see if this is something I'd like to do? So,
I would piggyback and say mentorship is going to be huge in terms of, like you said, freshmen, and not just introducing it into like juniors and seniors. I think it's going to be important to have someone, or maybe an individual with a partner with a team, that can kind of hold a team accountable, or having them meet with somebody within the community, meet with people like ourselves. I have people reach out to me all the time in terms of wanting to shadow me on a game day, and I'm always, open and willing to do that. So I would definitely say mentorship would be a huge thing.
Yeah, I will say, call me. I cold call people all the time. I mean, I will email, I will talk to anybody. I credit, again, my mom's gonna be so excited. That woman will talk to anyone. I mean, honestly, and I think I watched her mortified as a child, but also now somehow embody that it's okay. The worst they could do is walk away from you, and typically if that happens, you don't want to hang out with them anyway. So I, echo just inviting people to feel, maybe if you're not confident, just do it anyway, right? So any other last thoughts? I just want to make sure everybody's gotten the opportunity. I just thank you all for being here. Thank you to you all for showing up and showing up in like your authentic selves and really being transparent with everybody. I think that this recording especially is going to be incredibly useful, going forward. I think you offer such great wisdom and insight and practical advice. Just appreciate all of you for being here. And I really look forward to like continuing to support you all in your work and collaborate in some way. I'm like just really glad that we were able to meet, so thanks. Thank you to Dr. Laura Bloomberg and for Cleveland State for hosting us. Dean Anglin and the Levin College of Public Affairs and Education. This is a really cool space and just really appreciate all of the support. Scott Garrett and CSU Athletics, incredible team that you've built there. I think just the people you have speak volumes to the work that's being done here, and I really have really enjoyed working with every single person in your department. And special acknowledgement to Dr. Kleidman and the Forum Planning Committee, who I'd like to mention by name because everybody deserves recognition. Kara Keating Copeland, who couldn't be here today. Kelsey Gorey-Harkey in athletics. Elise Bigley, Carolyn Hughes, Steve Antal, Allie McCann, and Amanda Cook. They helped with our graphics, our social posts, all of the media, and we've met over the last, 4 months or so to get this forum going, and just really wanted to say thank you. We at NOWSA really embody the truth that you can be an impactful contributor to society. Continue to honor your sports story in a variety of ways as you enter public life. It doesn't always have to be prescribed or well thought out, or even the idea of what you thought success would be looking like, even for all of us up here in the next however many years. So if we can support any one of you, please grab one of our overviews, grab our business cards. We're here. We're here to kind of help bridge that gap between, what student-athlete life might look like and public life. That's why we exist. So thank you guys so much, and thank you all for being here. Have a great night.